When Sophia woke up zip-tied to a chair in a warehouse that reeked of motor oil and fear, she knew her stepmother had finally found a way to destroy her completely. The concrete floor beneath her bare feet was stained with substances she didn't want to identify. Male voices echoed from somewhere in the darkness, negotiating her price like she was livestock. 22 years old, and she'd become collateral for a gambling debt she never knew existed. 50,000, someone was saying. The girl covers it, plus interest. She's clean, another voice, rougher. No family looking for her? Stepmother brought her herself, said the girl's got nobody else. Sophia's chest tightened. Linda had driven her here personally, claiming they were going to see about a job cleaning offices. Instead, she'd handed Sophia over to men in leather vests who smelled like cigarettes and violence. Heavy footsteps approached. Sophia kept her eyes down, focusing on breathing, on not crying, on surviving whatever came next. The boots that stopped in front of her were expensive, black leather polished to a mirror shine. Not the scuffed work boots she'd expected. Look at me. The command was quiet but absolute. Sophia raised her head slowly and found herself staring into storm-gray eyes, set in a face that belonged on magazine covers, despite the scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Dark hair pulled back, strong jaw, full lips that looked capable of both cruelty and tenderness. This was the Hells Angels president they'd called to negotiate her purchase. If you love forbidden love stories, subscribe and don't miss the next one. What's your name? His voice was surprisingly gentle. Sophia. The word came out as a whisper. He crouched to her level, studying her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Up close, she could see the intricate tattoos covering his forearms, skulls, eagles, words in languages she didn't recognize. His hands, when they reached for the zip ties, were calloused and scarred but moved with surprising gentleness. "Well, Sophia," he said, cutting through the plastic restraints, "you're mine now." The words should have terrified her. Instead, they felt like a promise. 6 hours earlier, Sophia had been folding laundry in the cramped apartment she shared with Linda, believing her biggest problem was affording community college tuition. She'd grown up in the shadow of her stepmother's addictions, first alcohol, then pills, finally gambling, watching their modest inheritance from her father disappear one bad bet at a time. "We need to talk," Linda had said that morning, avoiding Sophia's eyes while chain-smoking menthols. "I got us a way out of this mess." Sophia had assumed she meant another loan, another scheme to stretch their dwindling money. She'd never imagined Linda would trade her like currency to settle a debt with people who collected payment in blood. The serpents don't mess around. Linda had explained during the car ride to hell, "I owe them more than we'll ever have, but they'll take you instead. Just temporary," they said, like a job. Now, in this echoing warehouse on the outskirts of Bakersfield, Sophia understood she'd become a bargaining chip in a war between rival motorcycle clubs. The serpents who'd kidnapped her were trying to trade her to the Hells Angels for protection. She was currency in a world that operated by rules she'd never known existed. The Hells Angels president, they called him Steel, helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. "You hurt anywhere?" Sophia shook her head, though her wrists burned where the zip ties had cut off circulation. Why did you pay for me?" "Because some lines you don't cross." Steele's gray eyes held depth she couldn't read. "And because I've been waiting my whole life for something worth protecting." Behind him, other men in leather vests watched silently. These weren't the same breed as the serpents who'd grabbed her. These men carried themselves with discipline, with honor. Their patches told stories of loyalty and brotherhood that transcended the law. "The debt's clear," Steele called over his shoulder, "but the serpents are finished in Bakersfield. You've got until sunrise to disappear." "You can't just—" one of her kidnappers started. "I can, and I did." Steele's voice went deadly quiet. "Question it, and you won't make it to the city limits." As Steele guided Sophia toward the warehouse exit, she caught sight of her stepmother through a grimy window. Linda sat in a rusted sedan, counting money with shaking hands. She didn't look back as they drove away. "Where are we going?" Sophia asked, as Steele helped her onto his Harley-Davidson. "Somewhere safe." He handed her his leather jacket, the weight of it settling around her shoulders like armor. "Hold on tight." The motorcycle's engine roared to life beneath them, drowning out the sound of sirens in the distance. Someone had called in the warehouse meeting. As they sped into the California night, Sophia's arms wrapped around Steele's waist. She realized her old life was disappearing in the rearview mirror. She should have been terrified. Instead, pressed against this dangerous stranger's back as they raced through empty highways, she felt something she'd never experienced before, the possibility of being truly protected. Behind them, the warehouse grew smaller until it vanished completely. Ahead lay the unknown, and the most dangerous man in California who'd just whispered that she belonged to him. The safe house materialized from the Mojave Desert darkness like a mirage, a weathered ranch surrounded by Joshua trees and silence so complete it made Sophia's ears ring. Steele cut the Harley's engine, and suddenly the world felt vast and empty in a way that should have been terrifying but wasn't. "This is it," he said, dismounting and offering his hand. Sophia slid off the bike on unsteady legs, her thighs aching from gripping the machine for 40 miles of high-speed escape. The leather jacket he'd given her hung to her knees, smelling like motor oil and something distinctly masculine that made her feel safer than she had in years. The night air carried scents of sage and creosote, alien after a lifetime in Bakersfield's urban sprawl. "It's not much," Steele continued, fishing keys from his pocket. "But it's invisible to anyone who might come looking." The house was small but meticulously maintained, decorated with the sparse functionality of a man who valued substance over comfort. Gun safes lined one wall of the living room like steel sentinels. Maps of California covered another wall, marked with routes and safe zones in red ink. This wasn't just a hideout. It was a command center for a war most people didn't know existed. Sophia noticed details that spoke of careful preparation: blackout curtains, reinforced door frames, security cameras monitoring every approach. This man had built himself a fortress in the middle of nowhere, and now she was inside its walls. "You can have the bedroom," Steele said, tossing his keys onto a scarred wooden table that looked handmade. "I'll take the couch." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." His gray eyes met hers with surprising intensity. "You've been through enough today. Tomorrow, we figure out the rest." Sophia wrapped his jacket tighter around herself, suddenly aware that she was alone in the desert with the most feared man in Bakersfield. Everything logical screamed that she should run, call the police, find a way back to civilization. Instead, she found herself studying the way moonlight cut across his angular features, highlighting the gentleness she'd glimpsed beneath his dangerous exterior. The contrast fascinated her. His hands, scarred from violence and labor, moved with surprising delicacy as he set down his helmet. His voice, which had commanded absolute authority in that warehouse, now carried an almost tentative quality, as if he were afraid of frightening her further. "Why did you really pay for me?" she asked. Steele moved to the kitchen, pulling 2 beers from an ancient refrigerator that hummed like a sleeping giant. "You want the truth or the version that'll let you sleep tonight?" "Truth. I think I'm past the point of comfortable lies." He handed her a beer, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The contact sent electricity up her arm. Not fear this time, but something far more dangerous. "Because when I looked at you tied up in that warehouse, I saw something I thought was extinct in my world." "What?" "Innocence." Steele took a long pull from his beer, his throat working as he swallowed. "Real innocence, not the fake kind people wear like armor. You were terrified but not broken, angry but not bitter, defiant even when you had no power. In 20 years of club life, I've never seen anything like it." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was ready to cross. Sophia understood she was seeing behind the mask this dangerous man wore for the world, and what she found there was unexpectedly compelling. "Tell me about the serpents," she said, settling onto his worn leather couch that probably cost more than her stepmother's car. Steele's expression darkened like storm clouds gathering. "Bottom feeders who forgot their place in the food chain. They used to run meth through Bakersfield until my club shut them down 3 years ago. Lost their territory. their suppliers, their respect. Now they're desperate, making amateur moves like kidnapping innocent women to leverage gambling debts. And the Hells Angels? Steele was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. We're not saints, Sophia. We break laws. We settle disputes with violence. We operate outside the system that failed most of us long ago. But we have codes, rules about what lines you don't cross. Protection of innocence is non-negotiable. What the serpents did to you tonight crossed every line that matters. His voice carried conviction that ran bone deep. This wasn't posturing or justification. It was bedrock belief in a moral code most people would never understand. Outside, coyotes began their nightly symphony, their voices rising and falling like a primitive chorus. The sound should have been ominous, but with Steele's solid presence across from her, it felt like a lullaby from a wilder, more honest world. What happens to me now? She asked. That's up to you. Steele set down his beer, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. The position emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, the coiled strength in his frame. I can arrange transport anywhere in the country by morning. New identity, clean start. Enough money to disappear completely and never worry about Linda or her debts again. And if I don't want to disappear, something shifted in Steele's expression, hope maybe or hunger carefully contained. Then you stay here until it's safe. Could be weeks, could be months, depending on how long it takes to clean up this mess. Alone with you. Alone with me. The weight of that possibility settled between them like gravity. Sophia knew she should be planning her escape, not contemplating an extended stay with a man whose very name made hardened criminals nervous. But when she looked at Steele, really looked at him, she saw something that called to the broken parts of herself. There was loneliness in those storm-gray eyes, carefully hidden but unmistakable, to someone who'd lived with her own isolation for so long. This man commanded respect, loyalty, fear, but she wondered if he'd ever known simple affection without conditions attached. Your stepmother, Steele said quietly, his voice gentling. How long has she been using you? The question hit like a physical blow, stripping away pretenses she'd maintained for years. What do you mean? The way you flinched when those serpents grabbed you. The way you apologized for existing back in that warehouse. The way you're sitting now, like you're ready to bolt if I raise my voice. Someone's been making you feel worthless for a long time. Sophia's throat tightened. No one had ever seen through her defenses so clearly, so quickly. Linda's not... She's struggling. The gambling started after my father died. The debt, the addiction, it's not entirely her fault. She sold you. Steele's voice went hard as hammered steel. To violent men who could have done anything to you. Who would have done anything to you if I hadn't intervened. That's not struggling, Sophia. That's evil wrapped in excuses. She's all the family I have left. She's not family. The certainty in his voice was absolute. Family protects each other. Family doesn't trade you like livestock to cover their mistakes. What she did tonight wasn't desperation. It was betrayal of the worst kind. The words cracked something open in Sophia's chest, years of rationalization and self-blame beginning to crumble. She'd spent so long making excuses for Linda, believing that her stepmother's addiction somehow justified the emotional abuse, the neglect, the way she'd been treated like an inconvenience, rather than a person deserving of love. I don't know how to be anything else, Sophia whispered, the admission torn from somewhere deep inside. I don't know how to be someone worth protecting. Steele moved from his chair to the couch beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, smell the leather and motor oil that seemed to cling to his skin. You want to learn? The question was loaded with implications neither of them was ready to name. Sophia found herself studying his face, the strong jaw shadowed with stubble, the full lips that looked capable of both cruelty and tenderness, the scar that bisected his left eyebrow like a question mark. I'm scared, she admitted. Of me? Of trusting you. Of what happens if I let myself believe someone actually wants to keep me safe. Before Steele could answer, his phone buzzed against the coffee table with the angry insistence of bad news. He glanced at the screen and his entire demeanor shifted, the gentleness vanishing behind a mask of deadly focus that transformed him from protector to predator in seconds. "What is it?" Sophia asked, her stomach clenching with instinctive fear. "The serpents." Steele was already standing, moving toward one of his gun safes with fluid efficiency. "They're not accepting the deal. They want their money back, plus you as collateral for the disrespect of forcing them out of Bakersfield. But you paid them. Doesn't matter." Steele's hands were steady as he loaded a .45 caliber pistol, checking the chamber with practiced ease. "They've decided I'm weak for choosing negotiation over violence. Now they're coming to prove it." Through the window, headlights cut through the desert darkness like searching eyes, multiple vehicles approaching fast on the single road that led to the ranch. The safe house had been compromised, and with it, any illusion that her nightmare was over. Steele tossed Sophia a helmet and keys to a second motorcycle parked in the garage. "Can you ride? I'll figure it out." As engines roared closer and the first gunshot shattered the desert silence, Sophia realized her new life was about to be baptized in blood and fire. The chase through the desert lasted 20 minutes of pure terror. Sophia had never ridden a motorcycle before, but desperation proved an excellent teacher as she followed Steele's tail light through winding dirt roads and rocky arroyos, the serpent's headlights growing smaller in her mirrors. They finally stopped at an abandoned gas station 50 miles deeper into the Mojave, its rusted pumps and broken windows testament to dreams that had died in the desert heat. Steele killed his engine and immediately moved to check her bike, his hands gentle as they examined her white-knuckled grip on the handlebars. "You did good," he said, helping her dismount on shaking legs. "Most people would have crashed in the first mile." "Most people haven't had their lives turned upside down in one night," Sophia managed, pulling off the helmet with trembling fingers. Her dark hair spilled around her shoulders, wild from the wind and adrenaline. Steele's eyes lingered on her face in the moonlight. "You're tougher than you know." The compliment warmed her more than it should have. In the space of 6 hours, this dangerous stranger had seen qualities in her that she'd never recognized in herself. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. "What now?" she asked. "Now we disappear for real." Steele pulled out a burner phone, dialing a number from memory. "Reaper, it's Steele. I need the cabin in Big Sur." "Yeah." The one off Highway 1. Full blackout protocol. While he arranged their next sanctuary, Sophia studied the man who'd become her unlikely protector. Even in crisis, he moved with fluid confidence, every gesture economical and purposeful. This wasn't someone who panicked or made rash decisions. This was a leader who'd survived 20 years in a world where weakness meant death. "We've got a place," Steele said, ending the call. "But it's a hard ride through mountain roads. You up for it?" Sophia looked at the motorcycle that had already pushed her past every limit she'd known. "Do I have a choice?" "You always have a choice with me." The sincerity in his voice made something flutter in her chest. When was the last time someone had given her real options instead of ultimatums disguised as care? The ride to Big Sur took 4 hours through twisting coastal highways that hugged cliffsides above the Pacific. By the time they reached the cabin, Sophia was exhausted but exhilarated, her confidence growing with every mile. She was learning to lean into the curves, to trust the machine beneath her, to find rhythm in what had seemed like chaos. The safe house was a far cry from the desert ranch, a luxury cabin nestled in redwood groves with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean. This was where the Hells Angels president came when he needed to think, not just hide. "It's beautiful," Sophia breathed, standing on the deck as dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold. "Bought it 5 years ago," Steele said, joining her at the railing. "Figured everyone needs one place in the world that's completely honest." "Honest? No pretense, no masks, no games." He gestured toward the endless Pacific. "Just what is." Standing there in the morning light, Sophia understood she was seeing the real Marcus King beneath the Steele persona. This man who commanded fear and respect also craved simplicity, beauty, truth. The contradiction fascinated her. Over the next 3 days, they fell into an unexpected rhythm, Steele cooked surprisingly well, while Sophia explored the extensive library that lined one wall of the cabin. They talked during meals, careful conversations that skirted around the growing attraction neither was ready to acknowledge. "Tell me about your father," Steele said one evening as they shared wine on the deck, the sound of waves providing a constant soundtrack. Sophia tucked her legs under herself in the oversized chair. He was a mechanic, had this tiny garage in Bakersfield where he restored classic cars. Taught me that broken things could always be fixed with enough patience and the right tools. She smiled at the memory. He used to say that everything worth keeping had scars. Sounds like a wise man. He was. Cancer took him when I was 17, left me with Linda and not much else. She studied Steele's profile in the fading light. "What about your father?" Steele's expression darkened. "Hell's Angel, died when I was 16, shot by the same Serpent's crew I bought you from." His voice remained steady, but tension radiated from his frame. "Took me 15 years to work my way into position for payback. And now? Now I'm wondering if revenge is worth what it costs." The admission hung between them like a bridge. Sophia understood that her presence was changing something fundamental in this dangerous man, just as he was rewriting every assumption she'd held about safety and protection. "Marcus," she said softly, using his real name for the first time since the warehouse. He turned to look at her, storm-gray eyes unguarded. "Yeah? Thank you for choosing me over revenge." When he reached across the space between their chairs, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers, Sophia felt electricity shoot up her arm. This was dangerous territory, falling for a man whose world operated by rules she barely understood. "Sophia," Steele's voice was rough, "you need to know something." "What?" "This thing between us. It's not just gratitude or proximity or adrenaline. Not for me." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "What is it then?" "Recognition." He lifted their joined hands, studying their interlaced fingers. "Like finding something I didn't know I was looking for." Before she could respond, his phone shattered the moment with its insistent buzzing. Steele glanced at the screen and swore softly. "Who is it?" Sophia asked, though the tension in his body already told her the news wasn't good. "My lieutenant. The Serpents aren't giving up." Steele's expression hardened as he read the message. "They've put a bounty on both of us. 50,000 for me dead, 25 for you alive." "Alive?" The word came out strangled. "They want to make an example. Show the other clubs what happens when someone disrespects them." Steele was already moving, checking weapons with practiced efficiency. "We need to go, tonight." "Where?" "The only place left." Steele's eyes met hers, and she saw something that looked like regret. "Into the heart of Hell's Angels territory, under the protection of the full club." Sophia understood the implications. Accepting protection from the Hell's Angels meant entering Steele's world completely, leaving behind any chance of returning to her old life. It meant choosing sides in a war she'd never wanted to fight. "And if I say no?" "Then I put you on a plane to anywhere in the world with enough money to start over." "But Sophia," his voice gentled, "they'll never stop looking. Linda sold you to cover her debt, but she also made you a target. The Serpents can't let this slide without losing face." Standing on the deck of the cabin that had become a temporary paradise, looking at the man who'd become her anchor in a world gone mad, Sophia realized she was about to make the most important decision of her life. "How long do I have to choose?" Steele checked his watch. "Reaper's bringing backup at midnight. We leave then, one way or another." As if summoned by his words, the distant sound of motorcycles began to echo through the redwood forest, but these engines sounded different. Too many, coming too fast. Steele's hand moved to his weapon. "Those aren't my brothers." Through the trees, headlights began to appear like predatory eyes. The Serpents had found them again, and this time they'd brought an army. The siege of the Big Sur cabin lasted until dawn. 23 Serpents surrounded the property, but Steele's strategic advantage, high ground, reinforced walls, and superior training, kept them at bay through the long night. When the sun finally rose over the Pacific, 7 motorcycles lay scattered and broken in the redwood grove, and the surviving serpents had retreated to lick their wounds. But the victory felt hollow as Steele surveyed the damage to his sanctuary. Bullet holes scarred the walls where he'd found peace. Blood stained the deck where they'd shared wine and tentative confessions. The serpents had violated more than just his property. They'd destroyed the one place where Marcus King could exist without the weight of the Steele persona. "This is my fault," Sophia said, standing amid the wreckage of what had been their refuge. "If you hadn't saved me—" Stop! Steele's voice cut through her self-recrimination like a blade. "The serpents chose this war the moment they decided human trafficking was acceptable business. You're not responsible for other people's evil." His phone rang. Reaper, his lieutenant, with news that would reshape everything. "The feds are involved now," Steele said after ending the call, his expression grim. "The shootout made the news. FBI task force is being assembled to investigate the connection between the angels and the serpents. My name's on their list." Sophia's stomach clenched. "What does that mean?" "It means the walls are closing in." Steele moved through the cabin, gathering weapons and documents with efficient desperation. 20 years of careful operation, and it's unraveling because some bottom feeders couldn't accept losing gracefully. There has to be something. There is. Steele stopped packing, his gray eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "The feds want me to flip, turn state's evidence against the club in exchange for witness protection." The words hit Sophia like a physical blow. "You're going to betray your brothers. I'm going to protect what matters most." The conviction in his voice was absolute. "Sophia, these men aren't just my club, they're my family. But family protects each other, and right now, staying loyal means getting you killed." For the first time since the warehouse, Sophia saw uncertainty flicker across Steele's features. This was a man accustomed to absolute conviction, to black and white moral codes that never wavered. Her presence had introduced shades of gray that threatened everything he'd built his identity around. "The Marcus King they want doesn't exist anymore," Steele continued, his voice rough with emotion. "He died the moment I saw you tied up in that warehouse. What's left is just a man who'd burn down the world to keep you safe." The declaration should have thrilled her. Instead, it terrified her. She was witnessing the systematic destruction of everything Steele had been, all for someone he'd known less than a week. The weight of that responsibility felt crushing. "Show me," Sophia said suddenly. "Show you what?" "Your world. The real one. Before you destroy it for me, I want to understand what I'm costing you." Steele studied her for a long moment. "It's not pretty, Sophia. It's not the romanticized version you see in movies. It's violence and loyalty and brotherhood forged in blood. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I need to know who you really are, all of you." After a moment, Steele nodded. "Get dressed. We're going to church." The Hells Angels clubhouse occupied a fortified compound on the outskirts of Bakersfield, surrounded by razor wire and security cameras that tracked their approach from half a mile away. Sophia had expected something crude and intimidating. Instead, she found a well-maintained facility that spoke of organization, discipline, and surprising prosperity. The men who greeted them carried themselves with military precision, despite their leather vests and tattoos. These weren't the stereotypical outlaws of popular imagination. They were professionals who'd chosen to operate outside society's rules, but maintained their own rigid codes of conduct. "Brothers," Steele addressed the assembled club members, his voice carrying absolute authority. "You know why we're here. The serpents have forced a war that threatens everything we've built. The feds are circling. Decisions need to be made." Reaper, Steele's lieutenant and oldest friend, stepped forward. The man was massive, scarred, and completely bald, but his eyes held intelligence and loyalty that ran bone deep. "Steele's been our president for 8 years. Never led us wrong. Never asked us to compromise our values. If he says the serpents need to be ended, we end them." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled angels. Sophia watched Steele's face as he absorbed their blind faith, seeing the weight of responsibility that came with absolute loyalty. "There's more," Steele said. "The woman they tried to traffic is under our protection now." That makes her family. That makes this personal. Every eye in the room turned to Sophia, measuring, evaluating. She understood she was being assessed, not as an individual, but as a catalyst that had changed their president and, by extension, threatened their way of life. "She's worth it?" Reaper asked, his tone carefully neutral. Steele's answer came without hesitation. "She's worth everything." The simple declaration sent electricity through the room. Sophia realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. The most feared biker in California publicly declaring that a woman he'd known for days mattered more than the brotherhood he'd served for decades. Later, as Steele gave her a tour of the compound, Sophia began to understand the complexity of the world she'd stumbled into. This wasn't just a motorcycle club. It was a shadow corporation with legitimate businesses, charity work, and a network of loyalty that spanned the country. The men who'd sworn allegiance to Steele weren't criminals by choice, but outcasts who'd found purpose and family in each other. "You built this," she said as they stood in Steele's office, looking out over the garage where club mechanics worked on both Harleys and exotic cars. "My father started it. I just kept it growing." Steele's voice carried pride and affection. "Every man out there has a story. Military veterans the VA abandoned, kids who aged out of foster care, men who made mistakes and couldn't find forgiveness anywhere else. We give them purpose. And now you're going to give it up?" "I'm going to save it the only way I can." Before Steele could explain, alarms began blaring throughout the compound. Through the windows, Sophia saw club members running for weapons as armored vehicles surrounded the facility. Federal agents in tactical gear poured from black SUVs, megaphones demanding surrender. "FBI!" The amplified voice cut through the chaos. "This is a federal raid. Everyone on the ground, hands visible." Steele moved to his gun safe, but Sophia caught his arm. "Don't, please." "They're here for me," Steele said, his gray eyes reflecting resignation and fury in equal measure. "Everything I built, everyone who trusted me, it ends here. Not if you surrender peacefully. They'll put me in a cage for the rest of my life. Better a live man in prison than a dead legend in the ground." Steele looked at her for a long moment, seeing something in her face that made his resistance crumble. "You're asking me to trust the system that failed both of us. I'm asking you to trust me." Through the windows, they could see federal agents positioning for assault. The men Steele had led for 8 years were looking to him for orders that would determine whether the next few minutes ended in surrender or bloodbath. As Steele reached for the radio to address his brothers, gunfire erupted from the compound's eastern perimeter. The Serpents had used the federal raid as cover for their own assault, turning the clubhouse into a three-way battlefield that would decide the fate of everyone Sophia had come to care about. Chaos erupted across the compound as federal agents, Hell's Angels, and Serpents engaged in a three-way battle that transformed the clubhouse into a war zone. Steele grabbed Sophia's hand, pulling her toward his private office's reinforced safe room as bullets shattered windows and men shouted orders over the deafening noise of automatic weapons. "Stay down," Steele commanded, pushing her behind his desk as he grabbed an AR-15 from his personal arsenal. "Don't move until I come back for you." "Where are you going?" "To end this." Steele's gray eyes had gone cold as winter steel. "The Serpents used the federal raid as cover. Now they're trapped between my brothers and the FBI. It's over." Through the bulletproof windows, Sophia watched Steele coordinate his club's defense with military precision. Despite being outnumbered by federal agents and under assault by the Serpents, the Hells Angels fought with disciplined efficiency that spoke of extensive training and absolute trust in their leadership. But she could see the inevitable outcome. The federal task force had come prepared for war, and the Serpents' desperation had given them the perfect excuse to use overwhelming force. The brotherhood Steele had built over 8 years was about to be crushed between two immovable forces. Her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize but somehow knew she had to answer. "Sophia Chen." The voice was crisp, professional, federal. "Who is this?" "Special Agent Rebecca Torres, FBI. We need to talk." "I'm not talking to anyone without—" "Your protection is in federal custody, along with most of his organization. The building you're in is surrounded by my tactical teams, but there's still a way out of this that doesn't end with everyone you care about in body bags." Sophia's blood turned to ice. "What do you want?" "5 minutes of your time. Come to the front entrance with your hands visible. No weapons, no tricks. Just a conversation that could save lives." The line went dead. Through the window, Sophia could see Steele directing his brother's retreat toward the main building as federal agents tightened their perimeter. The serpents, caught between superior forces, were already throwing down their weapons in surrender. She understood with terrible clarity that this was the moment everything changed. Whatever choice she made in the next few minutes would determine whether Steele lived or died, whether his brotherhood survived or was destroyed, whether the love that had bloomed between them in just 6 days could survive the collision with reality. Sophia left Steele's office and walked through the compound toward the front entrance. Brothers who'd accepted her as family watched her pass, some with confusion, others with growing understanding of what she was about to do. Agent Torres was younger than her voice had suggested, early 30s with intelligent brown eyes and an expression that suggested she'd seen enough human tragedy to develop genuine empathy alongside professional detachment. "Ms. Chen," Torres said as Sophia approached under the watchful eyes of a dozen federal marksmen. "Thank you for coming." "What do you want?" Sophia kept her voice steady despite her hammering heart. "Marcus King's cooperation. Full disclosure of the Hells Angels operations, financial records, connections to organized crime. In exchange, witness protection for both of you, and reduced sentences for his brothers who weren't directly involved in violence. And if he refuses? Life in federal prison, his organization dissolved, assets seized, every member charged under RICO statutes." Torres gestured toward the compound, where men Sophia had come to respect were being zip-tied and loaded into transport vehicles, everything he built destroyed. "Why are you offering this deal to me instead of him?" Torres smiled grimly. "Because in 6 days you've become his weakness. Marcus King, the Hells Angels president, would never flip on his brothers. But Steele, the man who'd burn the world to protect you, he might make a different choice." The honesty was brutal and accurate. Sophia understood she held the power to save or destroy everyone she'd come to care about, including the man who'd risked everything to protect her from her stepmother's betrayal. "I want to see him," Sophia said. "He's in federal custody. The only way you see him again is if he takes the deal." "Then give me 5 minutes to convince him." Torres studied her for a long moment. "You love him." It wasn't a question, but Sophia answered anyway. "More than I thought possible in 6 days. Enough to ask him to betray everything he believes in? Enough to save his life, even if he hates me for it." Torres nodded slowly. 5 minutes. But understand, if he refuses, you both disappear into the federal system. Different prisons, different states. You'll never see each other again. The transport vehicle that held Steele was armored and heavily guarded, but Torres kept her word. 5 minutes alone with the man who'd become her world, knowing it might be the last conversation they ever had. Steele sat in federal custody with his hands zip-tied behind his back, but his gray eyes blazed with fury when he saw her approach. Blood from a cut above his eyebrow had dried on his face, and his clothes were torn from the battle, but his presence still commanded respect even in defeat. "They hurt you." His first words were concern for her welfare, even in his own darkest moment. "No. Steele, listen to me. They're offering a deal." "I know what they're offering." His voice was granite. 20 years of brotherhood in exchange for witness protection with a woman I've known for 6 days. They think you're my weakness. Aren't I? The question hung between them like a blade. Steele's expression softened as he looked at her, seeing past the federal agents and armored vehicles to the woman who'd stumbled into his life and changed everything. "Yeah," he admitted. "You are. Then take the deal, please. You're asking me to destroy 20 families, men who trusted me, who followed me, who'd die for me without question. I'm asking you to live." Sophia's voice broke. "I'm asking you to choose a future over the past. With you? If you want it." Steele was quiet for a long moment, his storm-gray eyes studying her face like he was memorizing every detail. What kind of life would that be? Hiding from who we really are, pretending the last 6 days didn't happen? I don't know, but we'd be alive to figure it out. Through the transport vehicle's reinforced windows, they could see Torres approaching, their time running out. Steele's decision would reshape both their lives and determine the fate of everyone who'd sworn loyalty to the Hells Angels. "Sophia," Steele said softly, "if I do this, if I betray everything I've been for the chance of something I've never had, and it doesn't work between us, then at least you'll be alive to regret it." Steele laughed despite their desperate circumstances, the sound rough with emotion. "You're going to be the death of me, you know that?" "Not today," Sophia whispered, leaning forward to press her forehead against his through the vehicle's small window. "Today I'm going to be the reason you live." When Torres opened the transport door, Steele looked up at her with eyes that had made peace with an impossible choice. "I'll take your deal," he said, "but I want guarantees for my brothers. Reduced sentences, protection in federal custody, and Reaper gets immunity for cooperation." Torres nodded. "Done." As federal agents prepared to transport them to separate facilities for processing, Sophia caught Steele's eyes one last time. They'd saved each other from destruction, but the price was everything they'd both held dear. Now they had to discover if love could survive the collision between two impossible worlds. 6 months in federal custody felt like 6 years. Sophia had been held at a facility outside Denver, while Steele was processed through the federal system in California, their only contact carefully monitored phone calls that revealed nothing about their feelings and everything about their desperation to see each other again. The witness protection briefing took place in a sterile conference room that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Agent Torres sat across from Sophia, manila folders containing their new identities spread between them like cards in a high-stakes game. "Sarah Mitchell," Torres said, sliding a driver's license across the table. 24 years old, originally from Portland. "You'll be relocated to a small town in Montana where you'll work as a librarian. Clean background, no criminal associations, no connection to motorcycle clubs or organized crime." Sophia studied the photograph. Her face, but somehow different, softer, more innocent. The woman in this picture had never been sold by her stepmother, never fallen in love with a dangerous man, never watched a brotherhood destroy itself for her protection. "What about Steele, Marcus?" "Michael Stevens, construction foreman in a town 200 miles from yours. His testimony has been invaluable in dismantling 3 motorcycle clubs and exposing a network of illegal activities spanning 4 states. The federal prosecutor considers him one of the most successful cooperating witnesses in organized crime history." The clinical description made Sophia's chest tighten. Steele had betrayed everything he'd believed in, destroyed relationships that had sustained him for decades, all for the possibility of a future with a woman he'd known for less than a week. "Can we see each other?" Torres hesitated. "That's complicated." "Meaning?" "Meaning witness protection works best when participants make clean breaks from their past, including relationships formed during criminal activities. Our relationship wasn't criminal. It was born from criminal circumstances. Marcus King saved you from human traffickers, which led to a gang war that resulted in 17 arrests and the seizure of millions in assets. Even though your intentions were innocent, the relationship represents a connection to his former life that could compromise both your safety and his." Sophia felt the walls of her new existence closing in. "So we saved each other for nothing. You saved each other's lives. Whether you can save your relationship depends on choices you both have to make." The choice came sooner than expected. 3 days before their scheduled relocation to separate lives in separate states, Torres appeared at Sophia's temporary housing with an expression that suggested breaking protocol. "There's been a development," Torres said. "The Serpent's leadership was arrested last night in a coordinated raid across 3 states. The immediate threat to both of you has been neutralized." "What does that mean?" "It means you have options beyond witness protection. The federal marshals would prefer you both disappear into new identities, but legally you're free to make your own choices. I want to see him. I figured you would. Torres held up a set of keys. He's at a safe house in Boulder. 1 hour and then you both need to decide. New lives apart, or face the consequences of staying connected to who you used to be. The drive through Colorado mountains felt like traveling between worlds. Sophia had spent 6 months learning to be Sarah Mitchell, practicing a manufactured history and relationships that felt like wearing clothes that didn't fit. Now she was racing toward the only person who knew who she really was beneath the federal witness identity. Steele was waiting on the safe house porch when she arrived, and seeing him again hit her like a physical blow. He looked older, harder, worn down by months of betraying everything he'd held sacred. The storm-gray eyes that had captivated her in that warehouse now carried shadows that spoke of choices that couldn't be undone. Sophia. Her name on his lips sounded like prayer and curse combined. Marcus? She climbed the steps slowly, afraid that moving too fast might shatter the fragile reality of being in the same space again. You look different, he said, studying her face like he was memorizing details he might lose again. Federal custody will do that. She gestured toward his appearance. Clean-shaven, shorter hair, clothes that belonged on a construction site rather than a motorcycle club. You too. Sometimes I don't recognize myself in the mirror. They stood 3 feet apart, separated by distance that felt infinite and non-existent simultaneously. 6 months of longing, fear, and uncertainty hung between them like a living thing. Was it worth it? Sophia asked. Destroying everything you built? Steele was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving her face. Ask me in 50 years. We might not have 50 years. Torres says staying together means living with targets on our backs forever. And living apart means dying inside while pretending to be people we're not. The honesty was brutal and necessary. They'd both sacrificed everything for the possibility of love, but possibility wasn't guarantee. Standing here in Colorado sunshine, looking at the man who'd risked his soul to protect her, Sophia realized they were about to make the choice that would define the rest of their lives. I have a proposal, Steele said, stepping closer. Not witness protection, not fake identities, not hiding from who we are. What then? We disappear together, international off the grid, start over somewhere the serpents and the feds and everyone else who wants to use us can't find us. Steele's voice gained strength as he spoke. I've got money hidden in accounts they don't know about, enough to live comfortably anywhere in the world. As fugitives? As free people who refuse to let other people's choices define our future. The proposal was insane, romantic, terrifying, and perfect in equal measure. Sophia found herself thinking of her father's words. Everything worth keeping had scars. She and Steele were both scarred by the events that brought them together, but maybe those scars were what made them strong enough to survive anything. Where would we go? Anywhere you want. Small town in New Zealand, beach house in Costa Rica, mountain cabin in Switzerland. Somewhere we can figure out who we are when we're not running from who we used to be. And if they find us? Steele smiled, the first genuine expression of joy she'd seen from him since before the federal raid. Then we run again, together. The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted their moment, federal marshals arriving to collect them for final witness protection processing. This was it. The moment of irreversible choice between manufactured safety and authentic love. Sophia, Steele said urgently, extending his hand. Trust me one more time. Looking at his outstretched hand, Sophia saw their entire future balanced on her decision. Federal agents would burst through the safe house door in minutes, offering them separate lives free from danger but empty of meaning. Or they could run together into an uncertain future that promised nothing except the chance to discover who they could become together. She took his hand. Let's go, Sophia said, following Steele toward the back of the safe house where a motorcycle waited in the garage. Not his familiar Harley, but a new machine that represented new possibilities. As they disappeared into Colorado wilderness, with federal sirens wailing behind them, Sophia realized she'd finally learned the difference between being saved and saving herself. Steele had rescued her from the warehouse, but choosing him over safety was her own act of rebellion against a world that would rather see her hide than live. Behind them, their old lives crumbled into federal evidence files. Ahead lay everything they'd never dared to dream possible. 2 years later, the small cafe overlooking Lake Como served the best espresso in northern Italy, according to locals who'd been coming to Marco and Sophia's establishment since the American couple had appeared seemingly from nowhere with enough cash to buy the struggling business outright. Sophia, now Sophia to their neighbors, moved through the morning rush with confidence that would have been unrecognizable to the terrified woman who'd been zip-tied in a warehouse 26 months earlier. Her Italian was improving daily, helped by Steele's surprising fluency in the language he'd learned during a childhood spent with his immigrant grandmother. "Buongiorno, Signora Benedetti," Sophia called to their regular customer, an elderly widow who came every morning for cappuccino and gossip about the village's romantic entanglements. "The usual?" "Si, cara mia. And tell me, when will you and Marco give this town something to really talk about?" The old woman's eyes twinkled as she gestured toward Sophia's left hand, still bare of rings. "When he asks properly," Sophia replied in careful Italian, earning approving laughter from the other patrons. Steele emerged from the kitchen carrying fresh pastries, his movements still carrying the controlled power that had first captivated her, though now channeled into creating perfect cornetti instead of commanding a motorcycle club. The transformation continued to amaze her. This man who'd once inspired fear across California now charmed elderly Italian women with his careful pronunciation and willingness to listen to their stories about grandchildren and village politics. "Any news?" Sophia asked quietly as Steele joined her behind the counter during the afternoon lull. He shook his head, checking the encrypted phone they used to monitor American news sources. "Torres sent an update last week. The Serpent's leadership is still in federal custody. The remaining Hells Angels chapters have gone completely legitimate. Construction, security, motorcycle repair. No criminal activity. Do you miss it?" The question came out before Sophia could stop herself, as it had periodically over the past 2 years. Steele considered the question seriously, as he always did. "I miss the brotherhood, the sense of purpose, of belonging to something bigger than myself." He gestured toward the cafe, where their regular customers chatted in rapid Italian about local politics and family drama. "But I've found those things here too, in different ways. And the power, the respect. Signora Benedetti respects my ability to remember how she likes her cappuccino. Teenager who helps with deliveries looks up to me because I taught him to ride a motorcycle safely. It's different, but it's real." The honesty was one of the things Sophia loved most about their new life. Stripped of their former identities, they'd been forced to discover who they actually were beneath the roles they'd played. Steele, without the Hells Angels presidency, was still a natural leader, but gentler, more thoughtful. Sophia, without her stepmother's psychological manipulation, had blossomed into someone confident and decisive. "Any regrets?" Steele asked, returning her question. "About leaving witness protection, about running away with a wanted man, about learning to make perfect espresso instead of finishing college." Sophia pretended to consider. "None. Not even when Agent Torres calls to remind us that we're still technically federal fugitives? Especially then." Their laughter was interrupted by the arrival of their afternoon delivery, fresh flowers for the cafe tables brought by Giuseppe, the 16-year-old whose motorcycle lessons from Steele had scandalized and impressed the village in equal measure. "Marco," Giuseppe said in excited English he'd been practicing, "I have news from America." Steele tensed immediately, old instincts flaring at any mention of their former home. "What kind of news?" Giuseppe held up his phone, showing a news article he'd found while practicing his English reading. "Your old, how do you say, motorcycle friends? They are building houses now, for poor people. Very nice story." The article detailed the Bakersfield Hells Angels transformation into a legitimate construction company. specializing in affordable housing for veterans and low-income families. Reaper, Steele's former lieutenant, was quoted extensively about the organization's commitment to serving their community through legal means. "They're using everything I taught them about leadership and organization," Steele said quietly, scrolling through the article. "Just applying it to building instead of breaking." "You're proud of them," Sophia observed. "I'm proud they found a way to honor the brotherhood without destroying themselves." That evening, as they closed the cafe and walked hand in hand through cobblestone streets that had become home, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this place. 2 years ago, she'd been a commodity sold to pay someone else's debts. Now she was a woman who'd chosen love over safety, adventure over security, authentic life over manufactured protection. "Sophia," Steele said as they reached the small apartment above the cafe that they'd made their sanctuary, "I have something for you." He pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket, worn and travel-stained, but containing something that made Sophia's breath catch. The ring was simple, elegant, clearly handmade by someone who understood that the most precious things carried stories rather than price tags. "I had it made by the jeweler in the next village," Steele said, dropping to one knee on the ancient stones. "Used gold from my father's ring and my grandfather's watch. Figured if we're going to build something new, it should carry the best parts of what came before. Marcus, I know we can't have a normal life. I know there are people who'd still like to see us dead or in prison. But I also know that everything worth having requires risk, and you're worth every risk I've ever taken." Sophia looked down at this man who'd destroyed his old life to protect her, who'd learned to make espresso and speak Italian and charm elderly widows, all for the chance to build something real with a woman he'd known for 6 impossible days. "Yes," she said, pulling him to his feet. "But only if you promise me something. Anything. Promise me that when we're 90 and telling our grandchildren this story, you'll still think saving me was worth betraying everything you used to be." Steele slipped the ring onto her finger, the metal warm from his touch. "I promise, but only if you promise me something back." "What?" "Promise me that when we're 90, you'll still think running away with me was worth giving up safety for adventure." As church bells rang across the lake and Italian stars emerged in the darkening sky, Sophia kissed the man who'd become her husband, her partner, her choice above all others. Behind them lay everything they'd sacrificed for love. Ahead stretched a future built on the radical decision to trust each other above all else. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and stay for the next ride. They'd paid the price for forbidden love, and the promise had proved worth every sacrifice.